credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Man podcast, a podcast centered around self-mastery. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, I'm joined by none other than HomerHelios. Homer is an entrepreneur, athlete, and solar health advocate who is well-versed in philosophy, spiritualism, and strength training. You know him best for his work in aesthetics and storytelling on Instagram. And today, I'm excited to go a bit deeper with the man behind the physique. Homer, welcome to the show, brother.
Quite the intro, man. Thank you, Zach. I'm happy to be here, man.
Of course, bro. I always like to give people their shine. I think we as people have a tendency to undersell ourselves. And so not that I'm overselling you, but I'm upselling everybody like I like to have on my guests. And give them their shine. Like I said, I think not enough people are truly seen and appreciated. And certainly this is a new foray, which we can get into here in a second, but long form discussion. I know as your content has evolved and people can kind of scroll back through your feed and see that like originally it was just like aesthetic imagery and writing and storytelling, and you've kind of branched into short form content, sharing your voice and like your actual thoughts, just kind of more organically, I suppose. Still remaining with that like anonymity, but before we get into all that stuff, I want to kind of hear a little bit of the origin story. We've touched briefly on the call when we connected first on where you came into all this stuff, but I think it'd be helpful for people that are really curious about the man behind the page. Like, what was your path to this world that I deem like self-mastery, self-development, self-actualization? I think a lot of us start as insecure kids for whatever reason, trying to figure out the world and then find our way to something, whether it's a leader, a coach, an inspirational figure, a book. So yeah, take me a little bit through the origin story.
Yeah, definitely, man. The process of self-mastery has definitely been a long one. And I would say that it started in the gym. For sure, like both of my parents were gym rats growing up. I was raised in kids clubs, like always just watching my parents work out, and then they come to scoop me up. So as soon as I was old enough to actually have a membership, I was immediately lifting weights. So that's always been like a staple of who I am. And, obviously starting off as a gym bro, like the pre-workouts, all the whey proteins, all of these things that everyone kind of who jumps into that world gets kind of indoctrinated into. And kind of just extrapolating from that foundation, I was able to kind of get into more spiritual mastery, like just meditation, things of this nature, being able to I've traveled a lot as well, trying to just I was young, so I guess trying to find myself was kind of on the path. I just know that I didn't want to immediately jump into a career, immediately jump into a path. I wanted to be able to see the world, kind of have this worldly perspective a bit, all the while staying healthy and lifting weights. But kind of connecting the dots throughout the past years of how much your workouts will improve if you're eating right, and kind of discovering what eating right means, kind of realizing how food is extremely spiritual and how it affects the way that you interact with your reality, how you're able to kind of build a mental state that allows you to kind of take charge of your own life by what you put on the plate, by how you're exercising, how often you're out and about moving, just kind of realizing that, to succeed in a modern world, you need to kind of integrate the way we've lived for thousands of years, and kind of trying to bridge that gap has been a huge benefit for me.
Definitely. And I think it's everybody has their entry point, and whether it's like the stories that captivate us from the great men of history, and so it's like initially intellectual and then becomes physical, or vice versa. For me, it was just being an insecure kid playing sports, wanting to look like the athlete that I was, but I was like chubbier. And so you Google search like how to get abs, and then that's where it starts. But training goes into nutrition goes into bioenergetics, and then it's just like this huge world opens up. I'm curious though, with I guess the spiritual side, which is definitely in the modern West harder to find our way to, or more culturally taboo, maybe harder to digest in our like modern kind of language. Were you raised in a home that like had spiritualism or spirituality or religion in any sort of way, or was this more of like a internal pursuit?
Not that it was absent, but it wasn't a priority. I definitely had like other people in my family that had strong faiths, whether that be in religion or just some type of belief where I felt that they felt strongly towards something that you couldn't really see. Um, but I was always a very introspective child, so just thinking a lot, internalizing a lot, and that kind of that led to me just being able to explore like how those thoughts could manifest in the real world. So it kind of started um, around maybe 16, 17, where I really started to dive deep into some of the stuff, like more of the not I wouldn't say the esoteric stuff, but more of Eastern philosophy type of things, and kind of seeing the parallels between many religions, and seeing like, okay, if this has been around for thousands of years, there's probably some benefit to having some type of belief in more than ourself to kind of transcend.
Was there any sort of facilitator or mentor or like spiritual teacher that you gravitated towards? Was it like a first podcast or a series of books or anything like that?
Yeah, so specifically on the spiritual side, I mean, I had an LSD experience that really kind of blew my lid off and kind of allowed me to, you know, it's hard to kind of gauge how, some people say like you take these types of substances and you're awake to these things that are always present. You're kind of able to tap into these frequencies and realize that we are connected to nature and these types of feelings. But really what it was just making me realize that not everything that you believe is concrete, and they're subject to change with the external stimuli, whether that be substances, whether that be a podcast or a book. And tying that into the physical was kind of, I discovered Ben Greenfield, these types of biohackers where they were kind of bridging the spiritual life to the physical, and it kind of really resonated with me to build those blocks.
That's interesting. And so I guess as you're kind of coming to the discovery of this, which I would say is at a relatively young age for an American, um,
Mhm.
you're going through high school. Did you choose to pursue like university education? And then you kind of alluded to this period of travel, kind of open that up a little bit.
Yeah, so I did go to university for a couple years. Didn't really last that long. I was studying film photography. First, I was studying engineering, and then I kind of transitioned to film photography, which was always a passion of mine as well. So I would work and go to school for around like 9 months out of the year, save up a bunch of money, and then get like 10 rolls of film and just travel Europe, travel Scandinavia for like months at a time. Volunteering, I volunteered at some meditation workshops, other places for like free stay, as I just was able to, just familiarize myself with the locals, kind of feel like I was, yeah, just feeling like a local, man. Like I've grown up in Miami my whole life, so kind of being able to put myself in foreign situations on purpose to kind of just adapt and see what happens was huge for me.
What do you think was the biggest thing that you didn't expect from traveling or getting like dramatically out of your hometown?
I mean, the main thing is coming back and not having a stable foundation to kind of live out these lessons and experiences that you've had. It definitely makes you more of a worldly person, but then you come back to your city and you're kind of exactly where you left off 3 months ago. So being able to realize that, okay, I want these experiences, but I want to be able to come back to a solid foundation where I can maybe go 6 months and be comfortable, so being able to kind of build a life here so I can go out there and enjoy properly, not just save up all my money, go out there and come back and have to start from scratch again.
I see what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely having almost like bases where you kind of like period like cyclically travel is super, I don't know, it's helpful. I've talked, obviously just had Will on the podcast, and he's
Yep,
obviously a
yep.
huge advocate for travel. I know you guys have connected before, and I think there's a huge movement amongst people like young adults our age in the internet money space. Like there's an allure to this like wanderlust, like just get a backpack and go. But I think
Hmm.
it's underrated how having I don't know if I want to glorify the routine, but like having that home base, like there is like something kind of almost spiritual to have like a safe foundation that is like your place to go to. It's the way that things are
Yeah.
organized for you, like even just having your room set up how you want, your desk and everything,
Hmm.
so that it's not as chaotic. But I do think that there's so much growth by getting out of that every once in a while.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not for everyone. Some people really like to live that nomad life, just living off of a backpack and whatnot. But I like having a kitchen. I like cooking all of my meals. I like having a gym. Like these things are huge needle movers for my progress long term. And I feel like on the scale, those weigh a bit more than a year away from home. Like I like a couple months, a few months, but I always like to kind of come back to something stable. But to kind of go back to that question, like what was something unexpected? Um, I think something that really hit was like all the people that I met out there were like, damn, America is like a commercial. Like that, they kept explaining America like a commercial, and it was much more slow paced there. So to kind of see the influence or the perception of the West or America from a foreigner's perspective kind of made me see like that was kind of the first twinklings of like other things are possible than what we've been told, you know?
Yeah, I agree, and that was one thing I noticed when I traveled Europe. I did like a study abroad program and got to see a ton of mainland Europe, and it was really cool to connect with like people my age, other students abroad, and then get
Yeah.
to pick the minds. And yeah, like it was also traveling during like the Trump administration, so there was just like an amplification on a
Oh
global
yeah.
level of like what America is in this like very caricature way. But it was really interesting to see um, both how different things are, but also how similar people are. Like I think culturally and environmentally, Europe and other parts of the world are super different than us. But the people, like the things that people want, like kids still just want to be degenerates and they're going out like smoking cigarettes and drinking. Like
Yeah.
anywhere on earth, you're going to find that same kind of behavior. People, when
Sure.
they get older, they still want to have a sense of community. They still want to indulge in kind of the same creature comforts or whatever. And then, even like the really niche things, like you spend an extended stay and you get a gym membership in Madrid. It's very
Mhm.
similar to the people milling around and getting a gym membership in Miami or Atlanta. Like
Yep.
it's really cool because I think it both broadens your horizons to like there's a ton of the world, and they're not just like, oh, these are the people that I perceive to live in London or Munich, but like those are fully actualized, really like complicated
Yeah.
people living their full life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's very fascinating. It's kind of hard to describe until you do it.
Yeah. It's literally a parallel world with different languages. You're there, everything's slightly the same, but there's like a glitch in the matrix where like you don't understand what everyone's saying. The architecture is a bit different, but still we all find our camps, we all find our reasons, and they're all pretty much similar.
Definitely. Um, so I guess as you're building this out, you're getting a sense of identity through university. Obviously, a huge shift from engineering to much more of a passion project with film. And then it was like, okay, this is not gonna be the thing that I want to stick with. I want to one start making money and work for myself a little bit.
Mhm.
When did content creation and putting yourself into the world more broadly start for you?
Yeah, I had always wanted to create somewhat of a fitness page, speaking my mind, speaking of just how I felt about the world, more in relation to fitness in the beginning. But as I started, yeah, it was around probably redacted COVID like 2020, where I was kind of realizing that it was just glaringly obvious kind of how much the hive mind is real. And if you're not like fully self-aware, you could really um fall victim to kind of just being a sheep. And I really valued the fact that there was a direct bridge between the cause and effect in fitness and how what you put in is what you get out. to kind of being able to program your own mind to what you put in is what you get out in your life, and you don't really have to fall in line with the health advice from, you know, the mainstream, the life advice, the basically just the path that is kind of set out for you. Was huge. So I think, you know, between college and between the content creation was many years. I definitely fell. It's Miami. Like, I definitely fell into kind of going out a bit. That was kind of a cyclical thing, that I was obviously staying healthy and going to the gym, but I didn't really feel aligned with who I really was and what I was kind of here for. I had a vision that obviously this isn't a permanent thing that I'm a part of, but the people that are in this environment, they kind of don't really see the end game. So if you're able to realize that, once you do realize that, any day after that, that you're continuing to impose a habit on yourself that isn't bringing you the life you want, you're just kind of telling yourself that you're not worthy of breaking out of that. So drawing a line in the sand was kind of HomerHelios, like being able to be like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there and make myself accountable with who I want to be by living exactly how I want to live.
Yeah, that's really
Sorry,
amazing.
that was long winded, but
No. I like that answer, and I definitely want to explore a little bit because I think there's a lot of people, whether they're in the space, they still deal with like those shades of imposter syndrome. Like, should I put myself out there more? Or I think there's probably a lot of people listening, like, I want to start a page. I want to share my thoughts about whatever, health, fitness, philosophy, or just their thing, like their life. They want to be an influencer or just really kind of carve out a non-traditional path for themselves. But like you alluded to, there's both the self-limiting beliefs, but also like the environmental pressures of like, oh, you're a big Instagram guy now. Like, he's like,
yeah,
what do you mean you can't come out? Like, it's just one night of drinks, dude. Like, I
yeah.
mean, you look fine. Like, it's whatever. Like, but you said like, you know, internally what your standard is. And so expressing it, drawing the line, and then imposing it on your environment and leaving the room for the people to stay that should, and getting the people out that were for that specific chapter. I'm curious about, especially being in Miami, extremely like hedonistic at its peak, and can be kind of degenerate. What was that transition like, and do you still dabble in tasteful degeneracy?
Tasteful degeneracy is tasteful for a reason. It's definitely deserves its time to shine, but definitely a solid period of, you know, like, why would you impose yourself? It's like voluntarily going, I mean, not that some people do this, will voluntarily go to war, but why would you put yourself into this programming that you don't align with? It's like running into a wall over and over and over again and not getting the result you want, obviously. So it wasn't even like, oh, you're a big Instagram guy, because I wasn't really even telling anybody when I first started posting. It was kind of just, I know what I want, and I know that continuing to kind of sell myself short isn't going to get me anywhere, and no harm on these people, like, no judgment really. Obviously they're living their own lives and they continue to live their own lives, but you kind of have to realize that what you decide to put in front of your eyes on the screen, where you're going, where you're everything that you absorb is inherently going to determine the level at which you express your life. And if you want a life worth living, you need to do things that you deem worth living for. And that's kind of the most important equation that I figured out.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and I'm totally in alignment. You know, like week 2 of the program I built from like the guys that I work with is like curating. It's creation and consumption, right? Like, you have to be so almost jealous and greedy with your time and attention, because
Yeah,
if you do not take special care of it, the world will just grab it from you. Whether it's other people, hey man, check this thing out, or you know, the 1,000 people you've racked up in your following count from high school and college, like posting Sports Center highlights, like they're just doing this
yeah,
very mimetic nonsense that is just absorbing your brain and turning you into a shade of gray of somebody else. So super
exactly.
important to
Yeah.
buy back that time. But I mean, I think just even in the way you stated it, it's very self-assured, it's very self-aware. But I know even from my side, like that still can be a hard process, especially when those people that were from previous periods of your life, like friend groups and whatnot, are living in that kind of former way or understand you in a former identity. Was there a period of kind of isolation or loneliness where you kind of really stepped away before you
Yeah.
started to find your new circle?
Yeah, I mean, there's always like the core friends who are going to appreciate you for who you are. And it's not that the other friends aren't going to appreciate you, but they kind of just like fall to the wayside because I kind of you if you're relying on a connection from like superficial bonds, once you're not there anymore, they're not going to dig deeper to kind of find you, right? They're gonna just going to continue to doing their own thing. And yeah, like you said, kind of a shade of gray of everyone else. Like if everyone's watching the same Netflix show, if everyone's eating the same processed garbage, if everyone's living on the same wave, you're just going to inherently start to adapt these habits. So definitely there was some isolation. And it wasn't even like loneliness. It was more of self empowerment to kind of be able to know that I'm on the right path because I see this as the steps I need to take, and I should have been taking these steps. So might as well just like jog a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. But what were the hardest parts, do you think, for you?
Um, yeah, I guess in the beginning, the hardest parts is just saying no, you know, because if you subject yourself to, like, say you've been on this journey for like a week, and then you say, all right, yeah, man, yeah, whatever, I'll just go out. Now you are showing up to someone who is perceiving you who you were 8 days ago, right before you started that week. And whether or not you realize it or not, like these habits that have been ingrained in your psyche start to come out. Like you would just revert kind of to this other version of yourself. So being able to realize like, no, I just need to just keep reminding yourself that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, and you just have to let it show in the way that you express yourself in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And it is really fascinating. It's the duality of the really powerful nature of our subconscious mind, where it's really good at habit forming and pattern recognition, but it's also really good at habit forming and pattern recognition. So
Yeah.
it's hard to break out of these really well-worn paths. I was actually having a conversation with my parents, and the analogy I drew to them, which I think ended up being pretty good, so I'll bring it back up, is it's imagine like the thoughts have to take a path across a field, and the field has really, really tall grass. And so the first time a thought ever goes, it's just a man knocking the grass down. But if that thought pattern or behavioral pattern or whatever is done day after day after day, the grass dies and eventually there's a trail. So if that pattern is not going to the gym or eating processed food, or I just sit down for Netflix after my long day of work instead of journaling, building my side hustle, whatever it may be, then the next time a thought arrives at the field and you're the man that is the thought, you're like looking like, how do I get across this field? There's tall grass I can't see. There's a path right there. It's the most obvious choice. So you're always going to follow that path of least resistance. Yeah. So the first time you form that new habit, it's going to take like getting some thorns, like really getting kind of dirty and in the weeds again to knock down that new path, and then wear that path down to the point where it's the learned behavior. It's the place where it's very unconscious. Like someone like yourself, someone like myself, going to the gym it's not even like, it's almost unconscious. Not only is it something that we take a tremendous amount of positive from, but like I don't really think of, oh, am I going to go to the gym today? It's just like, when is it going to fit into the schedule today, right?
Yeah,
but there are some people for sure, whether they follow from you or for me, that they're on the front end of that journey and it is conscious every single day. Like I need to go, like I'm really gonna have to like pack the bag, whatever. So to that person that's listening, I think it's know that it's going to be uncomfortable for a little bit. Like when you're walking through that field, you're going to be treading like an uncomfortable path for a little bit, but it is not a permanent problem. And just like it was easy and relatively unconscious to form that pattern at the beginning for the negative thing, it eventually can be the same way for whatever those positive patterns are.
Yeah. I mean, the hardest part about change is making a new choice, literally. And something has to hit internally, as far as it's all perspective, right? Literally, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you've heard this too, like perspective creates your reality, full stop. So the way that we're perceiving the gym is that it is an innate part of our day. Like movement is a given. It will happen no matter what. So it's not like I have to carve out time. I almost have to carve things out around that. So just, and that anybody can adopt that habit. And it just takes maybe 3 days of going to the gym consistently to feel how good you feel. And then it's like, why would on that fourth day would I go back to it being a burden? Like it's simply not a burden. It's a blessing. Like all your burdens, all your perceived burdens are actually blessings. Like the blessing that you can go to the gym. If you don't even have a gym membership, if you can go outside, you can be in the sun, you could walk, instead of choosing what you chose yesterday and seeing the change in that choice. If that doesn't wake you up and kind of spark something, then eventually it will.
So do you think, and I go back and forth on this, I think it's definitely, there's an argument for both sides. Do you think that action comes before belief, or belief comes before action?
I think your beliefs, your actions are predicated on your beliefs, and your outcomes are predicated on your actions. So if you simply believe that the gym is a burden and you're going to be fat forever, or you're not going to be able to have the body you want, you're not going to be able to feel the way you want to feel, then even if you take that first action, you're not going to be able to be consistent with it, as long as you keep believing that core belief. But I do think there is a synergistic aspect there, because the more you act, the more it'll prove that belief. And the more you believe, the more it'll prove that act. So you need to show up with that mindset, and day in and day out, just like you said, that path will kind of show itself to be the way in all things, really. Like once you extrapolate the gym, you can apply that to relationships, to finance, to anything. It is just showing up for who you want to be.
Yeah, I think that end point is super important. And I think my current stance or running thesis is that it is a identity, like a belief about yourself. I am somebody who is healthy. I am somebody who goes to the gym. Because to step into the gym, you have to believe it is possible for you to get those things.
Yeah.
Like you're not, it's not like true reality denial. Like you look in the mirror and you're not in shape. Like you're not just like, oh, I'm in shape. Like that. It's not this like upside down world we live in where like Lizzo is healthy and shit. Like there is an objective unhealth and wellness, but there is the
I mean,
belief
that's us, right? Like we believe that there is a mass of populace that literally thinks that being fat, there's nothing wrong with it. This is a real thing, that this is a corrosive rhetoric that is seriously being believed in these times, where it promotes things that just degrade that belief, degrade that health, degrade that innate power to kind of make that change. And it promotes complacency, and it's definitely, it's this hive mind of just an unhealthy life overall that we have to kind of break out of, break that mold.
I completely agree. I mean, it's why the work that you do and the work that I do and a lot of the guys that I've connected with for the podcast and everything, like I think it's so critical that we are, there's a lot of people in this like corner of the internet that we find ourselves in, that like, oh, we're fighting holy war, right? Like it's kind of a meme. And I think that people on the outside, if they were to hear that, they'd be like, all right, dude, like don't take yourself so seriously. Like you're just posting Instagram carousels. But at the end of the day, like there has to be counter signaling to the psyops that are out there in order for people to have a fighting chance to get that positive messaging and return to this inverted world. Obviously there's levels to the discussion on like the elites and like the Satanistic cabal, all of that stuff. But even if you just drag it down to like a very kind of objective, non-conspiratorial perspective, where it's like, oh, all these companies are just trying to push more product. They're just trying to turn people into as much of a consumer as they can for the bottom line dollar. That alone as a concept should piss you off. Like it
Mhm.
is a true anti-sovereign, anti-individual, anti-freedom rhetoric that you're almost allowing or like conceding to the fact that, yeah, I'm just going to allow my mind and idea and eyeballs and time of day to be completely hijacked for somebody else to get filthy fucking rich and fly on jets and be able to spend those time on the tropical locations. Meanwhile, I plug into my cog job at X, Y, and Z factory and just have barely enough to get by and then buy
Yeah.
their products. And it's just
Mhm.
this like vicious cycle.
Yeah, we are facilitating the swinging pendulum. Like the pendulum is always swinging, and we're just that backswing to kind of impose this self-awareness on people to realize like what is actually happening. People go to a job that they hate for an hourly wage that they're always complaining about, but they don't really do anything to kind of up level. And there's people that are literally, I mean, your time is your energy. Your energy is the life that you have here, the time you have in this realm, right? So there are people at the top of that position that are actually harvesting your energy and your time so they can live the life that they want, and you're accepting that whether you realize it or not. Like, and that comes down to the belief. Like, you probably believe, whether or not you say it every day, like, I deserve this job, I deserve it. You're probably saying the exact opposite, but the fundamental belief that has got you there is that you don't deserve to climb that ladder, whether probably not in the corporate world, but just to kind of realize that what you're doing isn't what you want, and it's okay to put yourself in the uncomfortable arena to be able to change your life.
It's why I am so passionate about starting at the point of self-discovery for working with young entrepreneurs, these aspiring figures. Like there is probably a significant portion of the people listening, because I refuse to believe that anyone imbued with the true human spirit like is actually okay with just plugging in and doing the thing. Like there is
Yeah,
some level of nagging, and there is not. I think there was something extremely noble about working a job to provide for you and yours. Like I'm not going to condemn working
yeah,
for other people. I'm not going to condemn working a job, even if it's not your noble cause. But if that's all you're doing and you don't have an artistic pursuit or something that really fills your soul, whether it's coaching a team or training or doing yoga or just writing, like the human side of your spirit craves expansion, learning, and I think that everybody has it, and the longer you go with that denial or just ignoring, I don't know, it creates, and I've witnessed in even my personal life with like loved ones that I care about, like the longer you hold on to that kind of thing without taking those action steps, it's completely corrosive, and at some point
mhm,
that chicken will come to roost, hopefully with enough years left in your life that you can make a measurable impact for your own
yeah,
personal fulfillment. But it's why, like, when starting these journeys, and when the guys that I work with, I'm like, don't over pedestalize entrepreneurship or making money online just to build a job that you wouldn't want to work for in the first place. Like, don't just
yeah,
make a short form content agency. Don't just do SEO because it can be a money printing factory. If that is not truly aligned with your purpose and your passion, maybe you should start a podcast. Maybe you should go into health and wellness. Maybe you should try to make a supplement brand, a clothing brand. But the point is getting in total alignment with yourself, your unfair advantages. Like, what about your story is unique? And then how can you share that with the world? Because I
yeah.
think
And
that
it's
purpose is so critical.
yeah, no, and it's never been easier to do that. Like, it's if you're willfully ignoring the fact that you can expand in these ways, it does kind of foster that dissonance that you're saying, where you're distancing yourself from your own spirit and kind of just shunning it, quieting it, dimming it until you're like 50 something and you meet somebody that's young and taking those steps, and you're like, oh yeah, I almost had that. Like, you just kind of live with this regret because you've day after day accepted that for some reason or another you're just not going to do it. But I also want to clarify, yeah, there is obviously a level of self of respect I have for people who are working these jobs and providing for themselves and their families. But it is exactly, you have to be expanding elsewhere. To just go home, order Uber Eats, and watch TV as soon as you get home from a job you also don't like you're just, yeah, you're creating that dissonance that doesn't serve you or anybody, really.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes, I'm gonna see if I can pull it up here because I don't want to butcher it. I brought it up on the last episode as well, but it's from David Data, and it's in the book Way of the Superior Man. And I was rereading it recently, and I can't believe I kind of missed this in one of my first readings, but here it is. So basically, he's talking about giving your gift. And I think that everyone here, I mean, I wrote a post about it literally yesterday, or maybe I put it out today, but it's about like finding your purpose and giving your gift. And so his quote goes, "You were born as a sacrifice, and you can either participate in the sacrifice, dissolving into the giving of your gift, or you can resist it, which is your suffering." And I think that dissonance is what we're talking about. That is your suffering. Like your lot and burden in life will be sitting there knowing that you were meant for more or could have done more or always had that one passion, but you never reached out to so and so. You never shot that first cold DM. You never made that career pivot. You never, whatever
Yeah.
it was. And it really does just take that first leap. Like I tell people about, I mean, this is going to be episode 41 of my podcast, but the first one was
Nice.
just freaking AirPods, quiet room, like click record on my phone. It's like
Mhm.
minimum viable product, take fast action and lean in because you have no idea what's behind that wall. And that will eat at you forever because you
Yeah.
had the idea. The idea was given to you for a reason.
Mhm.
And if you don't act on it, Rick Rubin talks about this too. He's like, it is time for the world to hear that thing. That
Exactly.
is going to be given to the world. And so it's presented to you as an opportunity. But if you pass on it, it will be given to the next man who's ready to take action.
Yeah. And that's your intuition. The power and the clarity you have to act on that intuition is like you what is predicated on a healthy lifestyle, in my opinion. Like all the media that we consume, the scrolling that we do, the food that we're eating, the lack of movement, these are all filters that create that dissonance as well. If you're living a healthy life, you're actively trying to, just feel that vitality and that vibrancy that the human spirit wants and needs to function, then you could kind of tap into that intuition freely, just kind of you literally put yourself on another frequency where you are able to listen to that voice easier. And that's why so many people don't, is because they're living unhealthy lives and fostering relationships they don't like, and like just completely scrolling, invested in other people's lives 24/7, rather than tapping into that voice that comes from that stillness, from the lack of that stimuli, and the attention of what it is that you actually want out of life.
One thing because I talk about intuition a lot, and in this last year, I feel like I have acted more and more in line with my intuition, which has reinforced my ability to hear it, which has reinforced the
Mhm.
loudness that I can hear it and the clarity through which I do. And for a long time, it wasn't even really a part of my life. And so I think a lot of people, I get a lot of questions like, how do I know what I'm meant for? How do I listen to intuition? And you touched on a lot of it. Like you have to start living in congruence, starting with the physical. You have to take care of the vehicle through which you experience life. Like the body is the antenna.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
beyond that, you have to understand that like all these practices that are toted, like prayer and meditation, that's the call. The intuition is the answer. So don't just sit there visualizing every day, meditating every day, prayer, like taking prayers, writing affirmation statements, writing your goals out, having the mood board. If you're not
Mhm.
going to give yourself the quiet stillness to receive that call back with the answer, and then to have the arrogance to deny it. Like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
if you get that sort of call, you have to at least explore it. It's not always going to be an angel knocking on your window being like, you should go make an Instagram page called HomerHelios, and this is what the aesthetic's going to look like, and this is how it's going to
Mhm.
grow. And like, no, the answer will only come or be revealed through the action over time. But that first step, it was like, I sure you think about it this way with your page, but like the name came to you. The story you got to build behind it came to you. The
Yeah.
brand narrative, the aesthetics, the logo, even as it's evolved, like all of
Mhm.
these things are given to you as a gift. And what's amazing is it's just this first idea that doesn't really feel that big, but then the
Mhm.
world kind of expands from there if you're acting in total alignment with it. I feel 100% that way with what I built. Like when I was prompted with like, okay, what is the program you're going to be making? Like, what is it going to include? What are the names going to be? It just, the first thing came and it was just the name. And then from the name, it's like, oh, I wanted to do holistic self mastery, mind, body, and spirit, Renaissance man. Who is the Renaissance man? Leonardo. The painting, or he drew the picture of the Vitruvian man, and he just like expanded from there. And I've talked, I won't give my like brand narrative story here. I've talked about it before, but I don't know.
Vitruvian Man story arc.
Yeah, yeah. It's a tired story for sure, but it's just an amazing thing once you start acting in alignment that it feels like the next step just becomes given to you, and it's less of this like undulating, like I don't know, anxiety kind of state. So to
Yeah.
those listening that are in more of that anxious state, they don't know what that next step is going to be. Don't spend all the time on meditating, praying. Don't send the outbound call and then not give yourself space to receive that return call.
Yeah, that momentum doesn't come out of thin air. You have to crawl before you walk. You have to take those first steps. Um, and yeah, I mean the ability to sit in a dark room with no stimuli, close your eyes. If you can't do that for 10 to 15 minutes, then you're probably subconsciously living on a program that has been given to you. If you can't find that stillness without immediately thinking of doing something else, how do you even know that what you're doing in life is sourced from who you actually are? And if you can't do that, then you won't be able to get that call back and listen to it. And it's just one step in front of the other. It's never going to be easy, but you have to be able to walk it with the conviction that what you want is waiting for you.
So what would you say to someone who's never meditated but has always, I mean, they're hearing from every Instagram page, they see it on mine, they see it on yours, they're like, okay, this is clearly super important and I do feel a little bit lost and I'm looking to explore it. Like, what is kind of an entry point that you suggest, and what has been your story with meditation?
I think guided meditations in the beginning are super helpful. Knowing that nowadays our attention span, like we're all just basically goldfish now, just scrolling blue light, addicted to dopamine hits. If you realize that, you have to know it's not going to be easy, but just like the gym, it is a muscle. Like you can sharpen that blade, you can get into that stillness quicker. No, what I do is I kind of just I sit down, I focus on my breath, the sensations of my breath going in and out of my nose, really, really feeling like where my sitting bones are touching the pillow or the floor, anchoring yourself in your body so you actually feel those physical sensations, and kind of getting I mean, I'm sure like what body scans are, but for those who don't, like you have to envision basically a spotlight starting from what I do is start from the top of my head and kind of just shower me with this spotlight for like 10 to 20 minutes. And it kind of opens up the awareness to know that you are in your body, and that you can, using that as a foundation, you can build everything else. And having that stillness is super key. So just start. It is just a practice.
Yeah. And I think that is the biggest, at least, misconception. It was definitely for me. I had so many fits and starts with meditation because, you commit to, I'll do it for 10 days, I'll do it for 30 days, I'll do it for whatever. But I mean, if you went to the gym for 30 days, you're probably not even going to see results unless you're just flat out starving yourself and fasting every day. Like,
Yeah.
you need to commit to don't apply finite rules to an infinite game. Like meditation, accept that meditation is just going to be what you do and participate in it for the rest of your life. And then you can be okay with, oh, I'm just incrementally getting like marginally better over the rest of my life. And this is going to be a tool, just like the gym is. Like, I'm not going to just stop going to the gym because you'll lose all your gains. The same way with meditation, we have an incredible ability to forget. And also, we are in a world that is hyper stimulated, which is to some degree unavoidable, especially if you want to put yourself out there, create content. Like, there is going to be a time in the day where you have to log on. And so the mind is not completely indefensible. So you have to kind of strengthen it against a lot of that attack that it's going to receive.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a period in my life where I would gravitate towards, fostering that faith, kind of getting in touch with the spiritual, being able to meditate to get me through a tough time, right? Like someone having a wedding in a month and going to the gym every day, and then after the wedding, like going back to who they were, kind of realizing that these types of practices are beneficial throughout all seasons of life, knowing that and being able to realize that it'll always be there for you, you know.
I agree. I am curious, as someone who makes content on the internet, how do you balance the consumption side? Because I often, I feel like I'm definitely very definite with the people that I choose to consume. But I can find myself still getting caught. Like, you get on to upload, but then quickly you're scrolling and seeing what other people posted, commenting on this, scrolling through this tweet, whatever. So what is your actual like workflow with your content creation look like? And how do you kind of reinforce those positive habits even as a creator?
It is very intuitive, like we were saying, being able to tap into that. So if I feel something needs to go out, I feel like I have to write something or put something out there, it is kind of just going to organically happen, whether or not there's a schedule or not. But the main thing is creating more than you can consume, right? That is huge as to actually defining the relationship you have with the screen. Obviously, yeah, sometimes I will scroll Twitter a bit or fall into these little holes, but being willing to like have that self-awareness, building this muscle of a spiritual practice of meditation. The reason you do these things is so that aspect of yourself is at the forefront of who you are. So if you never give attention to that meditative practice or any other practice that roots you in your human self, then you're going to doom scroll for hours. But 20 minutes go by and I'm like, dude, what am I doing? Like, let me go outside, let me stop, because of that reflex that I've been able to build to realize that this isn't real. Like the screen is just grabbing your attention. So the more that you're able to kind of build that muscle, the easier it is to realize the limits of scrolling and be able to kind of develop this better relationship with it. As well as like there's this thing that I do at night specifically. I have the setting that turns the blue light into red light on my phone. So it literally like is less addicting to the brain. Like if you're scrolling and you're not seeing any colors, it's ridiculous how monkey brain we go into. And you're like, no, I think I'm good. I'm just going to put away the phone and just kind of just chill.
Yeah, that there's a lot of, it's funny, we need to almost put those like limiters and like mechanical blockages to get over that monkey brain, whether it's like you set a rule, like I don't take my phone into my bedroom or I don't charge it near my bed or whatever it may be. The red light's a huge one, obviously has kind of those health benefits as well. So I am curious with HomerHelios as a brand and what you're kind of building out. What are you working towards right now? And I know you kind of alluded to the Helios honey thing. I'm kind of curious. I don't know if you want to touch on where that direction's going, but I'm excited about the future projects.
Helios honey is huge, man. I love honey. The long-term goal there is I literally want a bee farm. I want to be a beekeeper and have mad hives that I'm just working on. For now, I'm just working with a local supplier to be able to push that out. But slowly learning my way around the hive. I actually have a class this Sunday to kind of start learning that. As far as like other goals, I am working also on a program as well that it's going to be called Helios Strength and Wellness. I'm kind of just going to take on some people and see if we can work together and really make some change.
That's awesome, man. I'm excited to hear, and I'll certainly, I would love to hop on offline and talk about kind of what you're looking to implement and share whatever learnings I've found in the year that I've been working with the guys that I have, because I think the world needs an immensity of more of the good work that we're doing. And I know that you have a ton of loyal fans that are excited to see more things from you. Are you planning to make the leap? I know last time we talked on a call, you were saying that this is going to be more of a full-time thing that you're stepping into. Is that coming soon for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think once I start the program, I would want, all of my energy to be going into the results of the people that I'm working with. And, I wouldn't feel fully aligned if I was, half in, half out. So, yeah, I've been working a job for a while to be able to actualize this and realize these bigger visions. And yeah, I mean, after that, who knows what's to come? Just kind of keep leading into new opportunities, keep growing and expanding, and just that's it, man, for sure.
I love it, bro. Well, it's been excellent. I want to be respectful of your time, and get to some of the closer questions that I ask everybody on the podcast.
Got it.
So I know we haven't gone too much into kind of the energies of the masculine and the feminine, or even relationship stuff, which I definitely would like to potentially in like a part two. But for this one, in your eyes, what defines being a man?
I think being a man is willing to follow your own advice. We will constantly impose standards on other men as how they should act, and we kind of don't live in accordance to the standards that we impose on others. So being willing to listen to that voice, to know what's right and what's wrong, and living noble and in accordance with the values that are true to you, and in your heart of hearts, when you look in the mirror, that you're living in accordance to the advice that you would give to others, is has helped me a lot. A constant reminder to follow your own advice.
I love that. A man of his word has certainly been a common answer, and I think it's pretty fundamental, right? Like you have to. It's our job as a man to go into the world and like enter it and right and like overcome and achieve and
Mhm.
give direction, lead families, all of these things. But you have to master that inner world. It's obviously like the running thesis of the work that I do. Like the internal world will reflect your external. You have to go into and master yourself. And so all of those
Yeah,
virtues that you tote, it has to be you have to be the temple first before
yeah,
you can.
and if you're doing all these things, if you're leading, if you're doing all these like archetypal masculine roles, if you're conquering life, right? But inside you're kind of living a lie. If you're not really in accordance to who you want to be, then it's kind of chinks in the armor. Like you're gonna eventually crack and fall apart. So not allowing yourself to follow your own advice will be able to allow you to have the composure to be able to do the things you want and get out of life consistently as a man over a long enough period of time.
Completely agree. The second question is, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and tell him one thing, what would that thing be?
This question's so interesting because like the timeline I'm in now, I'm extremely grateful for. So would I tell him to change anything, or would
It's
that kind of ruin
it's
the
barring
ripple?
the butterfly effect and paradoxical
Yeah.
stuff. Just like,
Okay.
what is
True.
a
Yeah.
piece of wisdom that you know he needed to hear or be reaffirmed, or the future version of himself say back to him?
Mhm. Yeah. Live true to who you are. Follow your own advice. That one's so huge to me because you could have a voice in you at 17, and you could have, just like we were saying, you end up 50 with regret. You can end up, I'm 27 now, I could be 27 with regret at 17. So take those steps, have that conviction, believe in yourself more, know that you're capable of whatever it is that you actually want to do. Say no, pick up a book, read more, and just take those first steps quicker.
Love it. And then I am a huge reader, aspiring to be more and more of a writer as I continue to practice that daily, and certainly love quotes. So, what is one quote that is always stuck with you or that you try to live by?
Mm. An intellectual man knows the world can be a dark place. A wise man creates his own light.
Who's that from?
I think that's Manly P. Hall. I'm pretty sure.
Amazing. I really, really
Yeah,
like that.
that one's great.
It reminds me of the endless summer quote from Camus. Very,
That's
very
what's up.
powerful.
Which one's that?
Oh, I found within the endless winter, or I found within myself during an endless winter, an endless summer, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Completely butchered it, less poetic than he, but speaks to that, the human spirit we've been talking about, like the I behind this experience, the spiritual, almost the human spirit that is powering this machine that's observing our experience, like, is eternal. It's greater than what is seen physically, and being able to tap into it really does feel kind of almost unlimited. It's hard to
Mhm.
describe to someone who hasn't felt it, but I know that younger versions of myself were less aligned. And so if you're somebody who's listening there and you're hearing a lot of this stuff and it sounds extremely aspirational and intriguing and it's something you want to get into, I can't emphasize enough, just like take the leap. When you hear the whisper, you follow your curiosity, just do the things that interest you, and it will become clearer. That's how you build the relationship with your intuition. You have to hear the call, trust it, and then if it worked out, that's a great
Yeah.
relationship. It's like a friend giving you advice. The advice works out. Thanks, friend. Like, imagine yourself taking your own
Yeah.
advice. The more times you do it, the more you'll hear it. It'll be reaffirmed, and it's like a positive feedback loop.
No one should determine your input besides you. Obviously, everyone's going to have their things they want to say, and you could filter that through your knowing that what you're doing is what you were here to do, but you can't let others' opinions of your plans determine you actually acting on them. I mean, that's going to completely strip you of that power building process, and especially at a young age, that's when, your brain is plastic. You're ready to form new behaviors and new thoughts, and if you're taking the advice, of people who are older, 30, 40, kind of imposing their life on you, how are you ever going to build a life that you actually want? Like, it's kind of black and white, really, in that sense.
Well, Homer, it's been an excellent podcast. I'm sure that people have picked up a ton of wisdom from you, and hopefully they've enjoyed spending their time and attention with us. Obviously, the most important resources. How can the people find you? And what are some things that you're working on? I know we touched on Helios Honey on the horizon.
Yeah, HomerHelios on Instagram and Twitter. Obviously, keep an eye out for Helios Honey. Probably early to mid August, that'll be launching, and Helios Strength and Wellness too, probably relatively sooner. So just keep an eye out. And thanks for the time, Zach.
Of course, brother. And for those that have listened thus far, I want to shout you guys out for soldiering on to the end. I always like to shout out the people that made it this far. And if you obviously are listening to this on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, you can continue to follow along for more of the podcast, and certainly a part 2 in the future if you guys are interested in hearing more. If you want to follow myself, you can follow at ZDSCHENKEN on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Vitruvian Gentleman on Instagram. Remember, your time and attention are your most valuable resources. So thank you for spending a little of them with myself and Homer today. Memento Mori, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Vitruvian Man podcast.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greater, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.